So, second of two on this video of the wolf render. This will be shorter. I'm just showing you what I'm doing as I approach a more finished state. So I actually went back in pencil with white pencil in the eye. I actually used a marker again, a 30% gray. And then I'm actually going back in, if you'll notice this, I'm going into what is the shadow, the cast shadow, and I'm actually going to continue that radial pattern. And I'm going to continue a burst of light reflecting back. So remember that the iris of the eye is it's like a headlight. It's a front glassy face or surface with a backing that is reflective, which is part of the mechanical way that eyes are built that allow us to see. They capture light inside. And so in the shadow detail, I do have to show a certain amount of information there. And where did I put my black pencil? There it is. Okay, so just a touch of black. These structures tend to be wavy. When I get up into the shadow area of the eye, I'll use a bit more black pencil. Believe me, I'm experimenting as I go and just kind of taking chances. So far it's turning out fairly decent. The rotation, the kind of pinwheel pattern of the fur, it rotates out from that edge of the top edge of the eye. And my strokes got a little long there, so I'm going to put in some shorter bursts of black. And I'm always keeping my eye on the right length. Am I making the fur too long, too short? And I'll correct it as I go, rather than getting off track. So as I'm doing this, I'm looking over my shoulder at my reference on my computer, and essentially doing a freehand conceptual piece where I didn't trace this. I just drew it basically from memory from the picture I had, and then I pulled the picture up for rendering the texture. So right here you can see I'm getting this kind of, it's a little bit of a glossy mess there, and that's where the pencil has simply built up quite a bit. And you saw me kind of rub with my finger. That is to get back down to the paper. You can get away with that. Now I'm going to drop marker back in and further liquefy that pencil and bring up that dark shape a bit more. But it goes a little too far, so this is what I mean about back and forth, back and forth. Now I'm going to bring some white pencil in. At this point I'm now burnishing. So if I really had to go back in and bring much more white in, I'd have to take the white eraser basically and just erase in. I just lift that out and I would re-render it. I'm not really unhappy with what's happening, so I'm not going to do that. Now the individual quality of the fur structure, I'm going to add details. Tufts of fur where they congregate together in groups rather than just steady individual strokes. And I've seen students render stroke, 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 stroke. It starts looking like a piece of carpet. It's too regular. Their fur is always changing, and fur tends to cling to itself too. Our fur does the same thing. Our hair. So now bringing some white strokes back up, and I've got to sharpen again. You're going to find you start going through white pencils fast on these more intense textures. That will also be true on the portrait, which, by the way, will have all these elements of hair, facial hair possibly, if you're doing a guy, but also the hair on the head, then the eyes, and then the skin texture of the face. And so what I'm going to do here is let's kind of show how you might do a transition into white. So I'm actually going to put a blended pencil right over this whole area. Right now this area just looks like strokes of marker. So how do I get past that and not go dark? So I put that layer of wax in, and what I'm going to do now is actually take my blender and just flow that waxy pencil right over everything. 2 layers basically. A layer I put down before, and that actually worked. See, I surprised myself. Been doing this for a few years, so I kind of can guess what is going to be successful. I have an arrow drawn here, but I'm just going to go right over it and show you how the fur would change as it goes down the cheek and starts to go towards the side of the head. And you notice my strokes are getting longer too. And let's say that because we are getting farther away from the face, I really want to speed this up a little, and I'm using my 20 here, my brush style marker, and I'm just going to go to the wide end of the marker and start showing where the mane begins and where the fur really starts to get long. So here it's maybe an 1/8 to a 1/16 of an inch long. Here it's about a 1/4 inch. Here it's maybe 5/8 of an inch, and out here it's actually going beyond an inch in length as I get out to the edge of the side of the face, the edge of the face and the mane. And as I do that, I've got a little blotchiness, so let's fix that. Take a 10 and do a transition, and actually that's a warm gray. Let's go with that. Thought that was a cool gray, but you know what? The happy accident. Let's actually do a little transition and introduce a slight touch of warmth into this guy, because that, like I say, very common with wools that you do see this kind of beige color creep into the lighter areas of the fur. And while I'm doing that, this is how you might actually mix both your warm and your cool. So let's just kind of run with that. I actually have a separate case for my warm markers, which I'm going to get here. And I'm just going to carry on with adding warm marker. Let's see here. So I need a darker warm. That's very dark. I can actually stroke in bits of warm gray. So I'm using this pointed tip to do this. And at this point it starts to look like a full color illustration. I'm not doing a tone right across because that would warm everything up. What I want is what I see in my reference, which is the separate warm colored hairs coming in. And I'm going to be cautious in how much I add, but I will say this. As I get out, as you move towards the snout, there's more warmth. In fact, there's a pretty big color shift to all warm fur. So let's actually start that here. So now I am gliding this 10% warm gray right over the top. And let's do a color shift. So color shift is simply, in this case, it's cool to warm. That's still too dark. Let's see here. Nope. Now, that shorter fur on the nose, or above the nose, this is the black fur, which is very high contrast. See how I lift that pen? If I just do this, blocky, heavy lines, but if I do this, flick, it gets a much lighter, more wispy kind of quality that is more characteristic of fur. But as I approach what would be the nose, and you know what, I'll start a stipple down here and just kind of indicate where that's going to be. The marker here. Markers are running away. So here's how you would do a transition. I'm going to start with stipple. I want to imagine that the nose is like right about there. And just to show what I would have on the edge, you're going to get this transition where the black skin shows through, which actually has white fur on it. So I'm actually doing a reverse render. I'm actually going to show the white fur as the spaces in between my ink lines. And as I go up, they're going to get farther apart, but also I'm going to lengthen out strokes like so. And you can see what I'm doing. That stroke was a little too long. But I'd say 1/16 of an inch to an 1/8 of an inch long here. And now if you watch, I'm actually going to drop in a base tone for the nose. And it's going to be a dark tone, so let's go back to a cool tone. Generally speaking, I interpret the skin on the nose as being cool. So let's just kind of put a spotted tone there as a reference point. And now, let's bring in some white pencil. And here, I'm probably not going to blend much on this because the fur is it's almost like a, you know, a 5 o'clock shadow, more like a 3-day beard that's starting to grow. The hair is very stipply, spiky, very textural, so it doesn't want to blend in very much. On the nose itself, I would do something like this. Circular strokes to bring up the sheen on the skin, like that. But I can also go in and use the ink pen too. Like so. And up here, let's get a little bit more of the dark strokes. And as I ink over this area where I have a lot of pencil, it's harder for me to get the ink to come out of the pen because the wax resists water-soluble ink. So I gotta make a bit more effort with that. That ink is wet right now, so I'm gonna give it a moment to dry before I actually add some warm gray over that. So I'm going to kind of hint at a warming color or tone coming in there. And you know, it's an experiment. Let's add a warm 60 over the top of that cool and then just blend it. You get these nice rich colors doing that, mixing the two together where it's subtle. You can tell that there's more than one thing happening, a color shift. Down in this lower area, I can show you what I might do with a gray pencil on white fur. Because it has about the right tone, I'm actually going to, in reverse now, stroke towards the white to start this soft, light tone. And to hint at where there might be some little tufts of fur that are a bit darker. Like so. And what's interesting is to see these subtle warm cool color shifts are very nice. They actually make it feel like there's a dimensional quality. Now I have this little arrow I drew just to show you how you can, say you had a mistake. Let's call that a mistake. And I got to cover it. You can disguise this, you can cover it. So what I'm doing is I'm putting my strokes right across it, like so. In fact, I'm going to continue the white pencil like this, so that's another layer. This is my third layer that I've added to this area. And then what I'm going to do is come back with, let's see, what is this? This is 30, that should do the trick. And I'm going to add these strokes right in, and you can see what's going on here is that they're actually obscuring that arrow shape. Plus they're bringing the area into focus by creating information, sharp edges, subtle but sharp. You know, just because an area is very light in tone doesn't mean that you can get away with it being soft. It has to look sharp and in focus, and that's really where you can get into a challenge with light colored fur and feathers, is trying to bring it all into focus and make it look like it's fully rendered without going too dark and going gray. Oops, that's not good. Let's put a microphone. Okay, put that in my pocket. Just one of those days. And now I'm actually layering again. Kind of show you how this is a progressive transition. It goes from dark to light back to dark. And of course, if I was doing this as a finished render, I would have plotted this out more in advance. Instead of just, I'm just winging it at this point, just so I can show you techniques. But what I would like to do is kind of define where maybe the edge of the face comes in. Like so. And you can see just by doing that how suddenly I've created a lot more depth and a sense of an edge over here. And let's see, what else can I do here? The body actually extends out here. So you notice I'm going back to putting in a base tone? I can do that before moving on to rendering the next section, which this would be the neck. And you can see how I feather into the area I've already rendered. So this is an example of how you continue the rendering without having a sudden stop. You feather over and you actually create some layering that allows you to transition to the next part of the rendering. Plus, if I look at this area, let's see, do I want to get darker here? Yeah, let's make a few of these areas darker. You can see I'm working fast. I'm back in sketch mode here. And this is a great way to render. I actually recommend, if you really want to get good at using markers for like animal subjects, treat them like a sketching tool and then see if you can then develop your sketch into a more fully realized render. You get a combination of both the drawn gestural quality and the highly rendered layering of tone. You can see I am now casting a shadow once again on that eye, which actually isn't this dark in the reference, but I need to set that eye back. And so there you go.